Home inspections are really important whether you're a buyer or a seller. They cost generally between $600 and $800. They could cost as high as $1,200, but $600 to $800 is pretty standard, also depending on where you live. I'm a big advocate for doing a seller inspection. That's because we represent sellers most of the time more than buyers, but we like to make sure that we know everything about the house before we start marketing it. We want to be the smartest person in the room so that we know what we're talking about. We can feel comfortable explaining the house to everyone, and we can be totally transparent about all the conditions of the house. The MEP, mechanical, electric, and plumbing. These inspection reports don't go too deep into those items. The standard inspection report, again, whether seller or buyer, pretty general for the house. They do an inspection on the whole home envelope. What that means is the roof, the exterior, and the grounds. That's like the envelope of the house. Now, they should certainly get up on the roof and they should look at the shingles or whatever the roof is made of. They should look at the chimney. They should look on top of the chimney, look at the pointing, all of that type of stuff. That's all part of the roof inspection. For the siding, they would look at it as if they were an exterior painter, seeing what type of, depending on what the house is made of on the outside, but if it's wood siding, see where there is some damage over time, where there may be some penetration from leaks, where caulking isn't there, that type of thing, so they can give some advice on whether the house needs to be painted, whether it just needs some caulking or things like that. That really takes care of the whole envelope of the house, other than some necessary landscaping and things like that, which the report doesn't get too far into. And then the only other thing that's on the property is the septic. But we're going to talk about that separately because we also recommend doing a separate septic report. Getting back to the home inspection report, after they do the exterior, the inspectors go into the inside where they look at all of the appliances, they look at all of the kitchens, bathrooms, they look throughout the bedrooms, look for any penetrations of leaks and all of that. Then, most importantly, although everything is important, they go into utility room, the laundry room for those two appliances, and obviously just taking a step back into the kitchen, for all the appliances in the kitchen. But once you get down into the utility rooms, they're looking at the furnaces, the hot water heater, the boiler, depending on if the house is run on gas, if it's on oil, the oil tank. And again, like septic, we would also do an oil tank inspection if the house did have a buried oil tank. Sometimes the tanks are inside the house, and that's fine because you don't have to get down to see it, but we would have a separate inspection for an oil tank. So after we do the inspection on the inside of the house, the inspector writes up the report, and he provides us with a whole checklist. There are photos. He points out, or she points out, all the deferred maintenance type of items or useful life items of the mechanicals within the house, telling you sort of what they think the condition is of them and what may need to replace. They would give some comments on suggested repairs on that. They don't put costs into these inspection reports. You probably have them do that on the side, but it's not part of the inspection report. So you may even have to have someone come, like a contractor, come and price that out. But very importantly, with these inspection reports, because the inspectors don't go into detail for all the MEP, like I was saying before, mechanical, electric, and plumbing, you may want to bring in, depending on the house and depending on the results of the report, to have a specific HVAC company come in and check out the mechanicals for the heating and cooling. You may want to have someone come in and look at the appliances to make sure they're all working properly. You may have some air handlers that may need to be looked at, or a hot water heater. The inspection report's not going to dive too much into any specific unit, so you may have to have someone come in to do those items as well. With respect to the oil tank, yes, you want to have someone come in, whether that's underground or overground. There is a law back in 1977 before It was required to have a double-walled tank. So you want to know sort of the year of the tank because you could have some issues if that's prior to 1977, and take care of all those types of details. With respect to septic, septic is very important for those houses that have it, and you do a separate septic tank inspection. You bring in any type of a company. Either you can bring in an engineer, you can bring in a septic service company, or a septic company that typically comes and installs and removes septic tanks. Now, these reports typically cost between $500 and $700. It's a little bit less than a whole home inspection because it's only for one item, but the septic is really, really important for these homes. When we represent the sellers, we love to do seller inspections reports. Over and above just wanting to be the smartest person in the room, we use the seller inspection reports as part of our negotiating and sale process. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, depending on what the asking price was, where we are with buyers on pricing, there's a time when we use the seller inspection report. When we agreed on a price, we send them the inspection reports that we did on the house, whether it was for the house or for septic or for oil tank. We provide all of that information to the buyers to be totally transparent. Because when we shake their hand at a price, it's including whatever the reports say. So what that means is you're really selling the house as is, and we have the benefit of the reports. Because the last thing that we want is for a buyer to come back after we negotiated a price and they say, oh, you got to take care of this, you got to take care of that. That's not how this is happening. We are going to show you the reports. We're going to then negotiate the price. And so long as nothing else is determined when you do your inspection report, that's the price. If you're able to determine, or if something comes up from the inspectors that we don't know about, or that was not in our reports, or that we didn't talk about, sure, we can talk about those. We don't have an obligation to do anything as the seller, but if it's new, obviously we're going to talk about it and try to resolve it. But if it's in the reports, that's it. There's no conversation. It's part of the handshake. It's part of the price. And that's why we do the seller inspection reports at the outset, because there's a time when it makes sense to use the seller reports as part of the negotiation. Now, as a buyer, when we represent buyers, always do inspection reports. There's never a reason not to do inspection reports other than possibly two reasons. One, you're in a bidding war. The house is in immaculate condition. You can see that there's nothing wrong with it. You have been through the furnace room. You turned on all the appliances. Everything really looks great. You don't want to lose the house for something small. So it's sort of like a deductible play. You feel like, okay, if I have to put in $3,000 to fix everything up, I don't want to lose this house. And I'm in a bidding war. I can get the house. Let me just agree to the price, and I'll deal with that stuff later. Now, this is if the house is in really good condition, right? So that's the only time that you would give up an inspection, is if you're in a bidding war and you're sort of forced to do it. Other than the only other reason is typically when you buy a condo or co-op, you don't do inspection reports because you're only responsible for everything within the walls, inside the home, not even in the walls. The co-op or the condo is typically responsible for everything inside the walls, plumbing and electrical that goes into the unit. Anything from the walls in to the unit is your responsibility. So there's nothing you're really ever going to get the seller to do as a buyer from an inspection report other than the appliances, which ought to be in working order with respect to your contract anyway. So that really shouldn't be a problem. You shouldn't worry about it. So those are the only two reasons you wouldn't do an inspection. But as a buyer, you want to go fine-tooth comb through the house, and you want to make sure you know how everything works, the condition of everything, all of that, because you want to make sure if you have agreed to a price prior that you know what you're getting and what you're paying for. Very important to do a buyer inspection report. The buyer inspection reports will cost generally between $600 and $800. They could go as high as $1,200. I've paid $1,200 before. My buyers have, depending on the size of the house, the age of the house, and if you wanted to have a specific inspector and you wanted to have looking deep into things, you could pay as much as that. But you also should be prepared for if there are certain components of the house, boiler, furnace, oil tank, whatever, that is beyond its useful life, you may want to have specific inspectors come in to check out those items. You may also do a termite report or other type of reports that may come up depending on what a house is, where it is, if it's close to the water, all of those type of things. But when you have an experienced broker who knows all these things, they should advise you. It's our job as the real estate agent to really point all these things out so that you can really make sure that you're getting what you bargained for. There are no surprises, and we're really taking care of you.